How you doing, everybody? Donald and G1, is that right? Johnny, John, Rickon, how you guys doing? John of John and Marita, Joseph, Orange Hand, how are you? Let's see. Okay, all right. Hi, Brent, how you doing? And Donald, Hawaii. That's a cool name. Um, what what I want to talk about today is hi howdy, hi Harry Law. Every town has its charm. Okay, where you guys live? Uh, I live in New Jersey, New Jersey. That is New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York make up a tri-state some kind of thing. They needed Connecticut for adult supervision. All right, let's see what's going on. Hi, Tim. Hans, how are you? Okay. And there's a rancher. Hi, Clyde. Okay, doke. Here's what I was thinking. At some point, well, it wasn't only I was thinking this. There's this one guy who's been encouraging me, I'll put it that way. That he said, why don't you have something on cheap watches, or basically watches that, the $100 range or something like that. And I said, there's grief. There's lots of watch channels that do it. And I don't know much about the cheap watches. And so, why don't you go to one of those channels and they can probably help you out a lot better than I can. But he was on me and on me and on me about it. So I said, fine. And so I have, this isn't about that, but it's how I got to start thinking about them. And so, I thought, okay, so here we have these really inexpensive watches. I have a couple. Yeah, they're over there. And I'm thinking, well, how do we come to enjoy any watch? I was thinking about, okay, well, when I first started collecting watches, more or less seriously, I'm still not sure why. I've always sort of liked watches and mechanical things, but I wasn't, suddenly I had to have the Holy Trinity, and I went out and I bought all the Holy Trinity, the Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet and Vacheron Constantin. And of those three, I have none of those original ones I got, but I do have a couple Vacheron Constantins, and one I'll probably be selling. But the question is that, well, maybe this is possible to really learn to enjoy a cheap watch as it is an expensive watch. Now, when I look at something more expensive, what I'm really looking at is craftsmanship or quality of materials and everything else. This one is my Daniel Roth chronograph with a El Primero movement. Not the most expensive watch in the world by a long shot, but one by a craftsman, a real watchmaker, and I like that. The same thing here with my my Parmigiani Colpa, and this is Michel's Parmigiani, the what's it called, the barley motif on the rotor, those kinds of things, all kinds of little stuff like that. But I also have three watches in particular that were very inexpensive. One was a Seiko Five. Now, the Seiko Five, I like the Seiko Five because it literally had five things that were unique to that watch, at least from Seiko at the time in 1967 or sometime like that. And so here you have something that's sort of unique, and it's also, sort of my my jumper watch. So watch when I'm out, need something to go out and do rough stuff and I don't have to worry about. And the other one is it's called a perpetual regulator. And the regulator is 200 bucks. And that one I like because I wanted a regulator, but I wasn't going to spend, something like $30,000-$40,000 on the one I was really admiring by Laurent-Ferrier. So, do I like those watches? Well, the answer is yeah. And so I was sort of wondering, well, what is it that we really like about watches? One other watch I have is almost a joke, not because of the watch, but because of me. And that is, I got an alarm watch. Normally, if you think, well, I want to have an alarm watch just to check something off, you go out and get a pretty good deal on a Vulcain or something like that. Well, there was this Russian pole jot. I got my Russian pole jot. I can't hear it worth a bean because my hearing's shot, but I can feel the vibrations from it. Cheap thrill. 35 bucks on eBay. So I have some of those, and I appreciate them for what they are. One of the things about the regulator is that the movement is by Siegel, and Siegel is sort of famous, notorious for making knockoffs of ETAs and those kinds of things. But the thing I like about it is that it is built. This particular one was built for a regulator, and what that involves, if you have, like, let's say you have a center second, okay, and so with a center second, what you'd have to do is you'd have to take the second hand and move it down to the bottom into a small second, and then move the hour hand up to the top. And so you have three separate places that makes a regulator. And so that's sort of interesting. So this is what I want to put to you guys today is that what about cheap ones? What about cheap watches? What kind of fun do you have with those? Okay, Tim likes a Tag Heuer Carrier 5 date only. ETA 2892 movement. Really like it. Easy to fix. Take it to Sam's Repair in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Mail it there. Great guy. Yeah, that's another thing about him. You could, take them wherever you want. Honestly, Bill, the Seiko Prestige line is pretty good value. I agree. I really agree. Hi, Hobby. How you doing, man? Let's see. As in the regulators, as in Tombstone. Yeah, that's right. Um, that, that's where my Swedish great grandfather migrated from Sweden to Tombstone, Arizona. So I got connections in Tombstone. Hey, Joseph. Once you've experienced a great expensive watch, it's difficult to find joy in cheap watches. It can be. Um, you know, um, John, by cheap, I mean inexpensive, okay? Using inexpensive parts, inexpensive everything about it. Uh, but it's cheap and it might be cheap in the way the whole thing works, or not. So what I'm talking about really, I suppose, is inexpensive. Okay, amazed at startups with Seiko NH35 inside. It's the ETA of cheaper watches. Yeah, now the one I've been piddling with still is this is my Soprod A10, and I've been playing with this one for a long time, and I haven't put it in the case because the case was a little complicated. And so I've been sort of putting that off. But what I've been doing while I've been putting it off, I've been, winding it up and running. The thing keeps beautiful time. So, and that thing was very inexpensive. Forbin, let's see. Seiko's out of is out to corner the micro brands. Maybe that's a possibility because now that ETA has been basically corralled by Swatch, certainly an issue. Is $1,000 watch cheap? Some of them might be, John. Davy boys, I second the priestess saying everyone can use a Seiko in the collection. Sometimes you can't be wearing a Patek. Good point. This is, my Seiko especially. This one, oddly enough, is really a wonderful watch. But this one I primarily like to use for walks. And the reason is that it turns out it's the only watch I own with a metal band. And the bands on Parmigianis are fantastic. So anyway, so it ends up to be one of my walking watches, that one and the Roger Dubuis. I do not have a Siegel regulator as I live hundreds of miles from the ocean. And so civilization, you said? HT1, Sarbio 17, quality screams, 20 ATM. Hi, Robert Nouse. Under $100 is cheap for me. Yeah, well, this is one of the things I think that's important to consider is how we give any value to a watch. Let's take, for example, if a person's not a watch collector and they're just sort of starting, and somebody shows up with a Philippe Dufour duality, I'd go nuts. I thought, wow, that's really great. Most other people see it, they just see a plain watch, something. Hang on a second, just a plain, simple watch, but it's anything but you have to know a lot and appreciate a lot to understand that. And so what about with cheap watches? And again, you can define it any way you want to. We'll say, under a couple $100. What can you do with them that would make them really interesting? Bought a new Duxat with titanium case and bracelet with the NH35 for next to nothing. Tough watch. Yeah, there's, I suppose, in terms of collectability, what you have or what you collect and what you choose to collect has a lot to do with your taste. If you can find a fun watch, here's this one. I don't know how much this one was. This was by Maurice Lacroix, and it was, I think this is called the Maurice Lacroix Masterpiece. I forgot how much they are new. They are under $5,000, so they're not that expensive. This one was on eBay for, I forgot what, eBay or Chrono 24. Now, the only reason I wanted it, it had a Jacquet 736 movement. And I'm very interested in that movement, and I like that movement, and that's why I got the watch. Cost me next to nothing. Now, it was about $1,000, but relatively speaking, that's either cheap, but $1,000 is $1,000. So, it's not exactly super cheap. On the other hand, the watches I make, I don't think I've made one yet that I've had more than a couple $100 in them. So, but I got that one with the Sopra. That's a great movement, and I got a good case for it and good dial and so on and so forth. So you end up with something that would be, $5,000 or $6,000 on the open market, so to speak. Okay, right now the public or the hobby hears about a watch, it'll be like snapped up. You could make the argument that there is no such thing as a cheap watch right now. Well, yeah, I guess you could. And so, it has to do with defining things. Oh, and room, Vostok. Yeah, I've got, Vostok and Poljot. There was some things I was reading about that and how they started. One of them in the 1930s, they bought a watch company, I think in Ohio, and took the factory and the whole thing, and it became, I think, sort of the core of a Soviet watchmaking company. But they bought the whole thing and took it with them. Um, I have a reworked 63 called RMR, Long Beach Chronograph. That is a wonder for the money. Yeah. Okay, Davy Boys. Yes, a Rolls Royce is superior to a Toyota. I guess, I think I I once had a Rolls Royce, and they're wonderful cars. The one I had, though, that particular, sort of for a few years, they had a they had a problem that wouldn't go away with their hydraulic, and so you drive the thing for a while, and you had all your hydraulic oil would leak out, so you'd have to go and have them filled up with some kind of mineral oil that they use for that. But boy, what a ride! Gotta tell you, that thing, I could live in a Rolls Royce. But you know, um, materials mainly, yeah. Uh, yeah, they do have the leather, the everything about them is really very good. I think, though, there are a lot of a lot less expensive cars that have all kinds of things about them that may be superior. For example, a Volvo, very well built car. Toyota is another well built car. Now, whether how you come to appreciate one or the other, uh, this is what we're dealing with. But what I suppose I wanted to go back to is that in a time when, um, yeah, in a time when we have um, a lot of things that are expensive and unavailable, we start looking at things that are less expensive. Now, John Anderson, I see you're going off on it's important how well it works. Yeah, sure. Does it work well or not? A quartz watch works really well in terms of accuracy and keeping good time. But there's something else that I appreciate anyway that may actually not work as well, but it's really cool. So I like the ones when you see the finishing and everything else about a watch, the craftsmanship of the entire watch. Now, there are other watches, like you take, for example, a Rolex. Those things work really well. They're excellent watches, and they work great. But their appeal is, I think, in other things other than their functionality, because there are lots of other watches that work just as well. The thing about Rolexes that I don't like is you can't see the movement. And that's just, but see, that's just me. I like to look at the movement on, and so if anything without a little window, I'm not as interested in. But I just bought a watch that I can't see through the back. It's got other things though. Corbin, yes. Let's see. Hi, Mark. How you doing, man? Is always towed with a tarp. As it's broken roll. John Rolls is always. Let me see. Let's see. Build your own 6498 or. I agree. You want a good watch, build it, because you can get a better movement. You can spend, if you spend like $200 or $300 on a ETA or a Soprod or one of those two. I think those are really excellent movements. And so what you're getting a Unitas, you're getting a Valjoux, or you're getting something like that ETA has put into some kind of production scheme. Pazu 7001. So you're getting things that work quite well, and they last. There are a lot of things that you get and they don't last too long. That's one of the reasons I like the lower frequencies, because they seem to last a lot longer. Any new personal reveals? No. Later, I'll have one coming up later for you guys. Um, oh, Jesus. Okay. Hi, Heinrich. Hi, Codes. Hey, Robert. Let's see. Machine assembled, John. Less complicated components. I would probably go non-ETA like Soprod or Peizu. Well, see, that's the problem, Mark, is that Peizu has been owned by ETA for a while. And I once this one guy was making a watch with an ETA, what's called now an ETA 7001, and I asked him, I said, "Isn't that the same thing as the Peizu?" He said, "No." He said ETA had changed something in the gear train or something like that. Great value on Speak Marin watches with basic Vaucher unit. Yeah, yeah. Harry Law, buying steel watches is cheaper than gold or platinum. That's true. No, I tell you, I don't, complications, John, are complications and complications. I am not crazy about chronograph. This is my only chronograph. It is more complicated, but I would rather have any day of the week I do for simplicity. And simplicity, really good simplicity, is much more difficult, I think, than complexity. And that becomes important. Now, there are other kinds of things that is sort of like art. The difference between a print, which just looks like I once had a Picasso print that was I think a Xerox copy of an original Picasso. And the Xerox company at the time what they're trying to do is show how good their thing was. But an original Picasso, while inherently, you can talk about inherently, does it have actually more value? Well, in some respects, it does. So this is not. You can simplify it. You can say, "Well, they all look alike, so they must be just as good." Fine, go ahead and do that. But that's not, I think, what we come to appreciate in some of the really good watches is the craftsmanship that goes into it. You either appreciate that or not. Hey, Eric, how you doing? Pazu was the sister of Zazu Pitts. Oh, Foreman, you've been hanging around with Clyde too long. Okay. Vincent Calabresi, one of the great independent, was self-taught. Yeah, he is. There are some like that. I think that there's a certain point where a really top watchmaker sort of gets his own ideas, and that makes him a top watchmaker. Calabresi he worked, I think, with Calabresi worked, I think, with some watch company, and he sort of picked it up that way, even though it wasn't formal. Hey, Scott, 825. I find joy in my Timex Marlin and my Rolex OP. Beautiful, peaceful. Yeah, Scott. This is another thing. Is what you can afford and what you appreciate. Now, if you can't learn to appreciate what you can afford, you'll always be frustrated. And there are lots of watches I could never afford, and I don't worry about it. All right. But the ones that I can afford, I try to find the very best watches that I can afford. Not, just sort of like, well, this one I like. It fell off the truck and I'll take it. Hey, Koji, let's see what's going on. John Anderson, cut it out. All right. I mean, you just is just starting to throw sand in everybody's face. All right. Let's just try to talk about these things. You're having this sophomoric kinds of comments. Okay. Hi, Jonathan. How you doing? Hi, Psalms. Appreciate great term for the subject. Yeah. Um, the I think coming to some point where you can appreciate a watch is has a lot to do. Hi, Dr. A and B and Vladimir. How are you? Um, where you have a some kind of sense that you can see something that's especially valuable to you, all right, in some way. Um, I've gone around and around with certain people about the spring drive, and not that there's anything wrong with it. It's great engineering, and but I'm not crazy about quartz watches. At the very end of it, you have some kind of regulating device, and it's either going to be a spring, it's going to be a hairspring with some kind of regulation um, escapement together, or something else. And one of the other things is going to be a quartz is another way for a regulator. Uh, Zenith makes these extremely fast, very high frequency things. I don't think much of them. On the other hand, you have these watches that you have by Carey Voot and Lonan, and a lot of the other really top guys are 2.5 hertz, and I really like those. They're I don't know. I hate to say they're harder to make to keep them going at a speed because the higher the speed, the better the frequency. I mean, the higher the frequency, the more accurate that they are. And this is why quartz are just about always more accurate than non-quartz. There's another kind of thing too that's really interesting that F.P. Journe did with quartz is that he had a battery that was in there that when the quartz was stopped, I mean, when the watch was put down and didn't move, there was a little rotor in there that would, when a rotor stopped after a half an hour, the battery would sort of go down to sort of just keeping the time in the electronics of it, and but it really wouldn't use very much battery power. And he was talking about like having the battery last 50 years or something when they first came out. I don't think they ever got them to do that. But what they did was to get them to the point where you have a you have something in there that was purely mechanical, namely this little thing that was when it was stopped, then by with some timer, then the watch would go down. Now that part was very interesting. The quartz itself, I wasn't. Cheaper watches. I personally see a lot of value in many German watches. We all know Sin and Nomos, which are great value, but think Dirk Dornbirth and Son, for example. I agree. Okay. Uh, yeah. Yeah, they're good watches. See, this is another thing is that you have watches that you can find some really good works in and some real value in the creativity of it. And that's something I think that we have to we do consider. So like I said about the Elegante by F.P. Journe and the Spring Drive by Seiko, yeah, both of them are great engineering feats, but just something I'm not crazy about. Same thing with silicon. I don't like silicon in watches. Uh, and you can say, well, but it's not there. Now, the cheaper watches, they'll have a lot of silicon that work just fine to keep because they're totally non-magnetic. Let's see. German watches like Damasco and Titima. Those are not cheap watches. Titimas, I was looking at them the other day, and they're a couple $1,000 or so. It's all about what you enjoy, and you should be happy for each other. Yeah, John, it is. And the question is how do you frame it? How do you take something and find what you can enjoy with it? That's what the difficult thing is, because like I said, most people who could care less about watch collectors and watch collecting, they see something like FP Journe or Kerry Rutan or something like that. And just that's it's just another watch, and they're both mechanical watches. I keep buying affordable watches until I get a hold of a Seiko hard edge series. I won't get another until I can afford a really decent watch. Yeah, yeah. This is something. It's sort of like art. You can get it's sort of cheap watches are like the refrigerator art that your kids bring home, and then or like my homemade watches. They're not going to twist anybody, but there's something fun to do. Uh, Daniel Katz about silicon. Bought an original 71 Seiko Poji 6 weeks ago for $20. Local market keeps up excellent time. Yeah, yeah, those are really, really, really nice. Yeah, Dan, some people agree, some don't. This is the other thing too. Some people are I mean, they're like little Nazis. They must agree with me. This is the truth. You must enjoy these watches. If somebody enjoys a watch that keeps really great time because they don't have they got silicon in them, like all the Patek Philippe now, that's fine. It's just not, and I think it's important for us to understand that we've got, some kinds of, we have taste that will be guided by certain things that we've come to value or learned how to value. And I got to tell you, a lot of things that when I first started collecting watches that I valued then, I don't value anymore, because what I valued was simply sort of a reputation rather than as I learned more about how they were made and so on and so forth, um, that made a big difference. These things have gone nuts. Yeah. Hey, Vladimir, Glasuda CQ. Vladimir, I really like the CQ. The CQ, I think, is a very good watch. Vintage watches might have been expensive originally. Yeah, vintage watches are another thing too. I don't really care much for vintage watches, even though I have one of my favorite watches is that my old Beauvais Mono Retropont, and so it's something that is I think important to understand. Okay, sheep with their design always caught my eye, but I think the time to jump on that train is past. Now they're overhyped. Oh wait, who is at sheep? I'm missing that one, Clyde. Let's see. Uh, Clyde's Omega Chronostop. Okay, I shy away from chronos. Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm just not into chronos. Uh, okay, it's your horological national socialist. My mistake. Check out your local markets for vintage. Yeah, I'm just not into vintage. Is that I tried and I ended up breaking it. And I'll see if I can fix it. Uh, what I did, I just got a watch case. This is from a pocket watch, and it has I think it's uh, what is that? Enamel. It's got an enamel dial on it, and it's key wound. And I wanted a key wound wristwatch, and so I put it together and had it working for a while. Then I busted it, so I got to figure out how to put it back together again. Um, what are you guys talking about? Check your local. Okay, vintage. I've got a 82 Seiko chronograph on right now. I love the absolutely iconic. I for years I wore a Rado that a friend had given me years and years ago. Wore that thing for years, and in one of those little bitty ones with titanium with a gold plate on it. I thought it was great. Um, Robert, looking into Orient watches. Orient watches, there's one by Orient called the Bambino, and a lot of the Orient guys just love the Bambino. They're watches that people can become very attached to that are quirky. Um, my thing with Jacques 736s is a good example. This is as quirky as you can get. It's a shaped movement, and I couldn't quite figure out, how it got done. And then there's a whole story about Jean-Pierre Jacquet and his hijinks. So, uh, love the Eberhard vintage chronos. Eberhard is one of those really interesting things. Picked up a nifty little vinegar. That's what I got to do. I've got to get a. There is one vintage that I should pick up, and that's it's named after that town right up in Massachusetts. Their factory up there is now a big apartment house, but that was another one. They were involved in the space race, working with MIT for timing and so forth. Copograph next week. Oh man, that is a cool thing. I really like to see that. Daniel Roth is the other name, which creations are considered cheap but are taken seriously. Well, there's difference between cheap and inexpensive. When you look at what he's done, the interesting thing of his movements, I don't know who they're considered cheap by. I certainly don't, and I don't. Most people don't consider that the ones that he makes for on demand are not cheap, 100,000 plus. Okay, guys. Well, anyway, I wanted to bring that up. We had some discussions about it, but I don't know. I think what we need to do is get some sense of really how to have fun with whatever you can afford or whatever you can get. Sometimes, and sure, you have a lot of choices with vintage. I think you got a lot of choices when you start building them yourself, and you can really look at the inside of a watch and see what's going on there. Okay, well, everybody, hey, listen, thanks for coming, and I hope soon I'm going to have something that is. Oh yeah, Sunday. So I forgot to mention it. Junior, thank you. Tomorrow, Sunday at 2 o'clock New York time, Eastern Standard Time. The What are they called? The Punters are going to do a review of John Anderson. That's the best thing you said all day. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And I agree with that. Okay. So we're going to be having they're going to be doing tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Go see the Punters. And we're going to talk about this strange collection. Take care. Hope to see you then. Bye bye.